they preferred me with it, because I've always had it more or less. I shaved it off once when they were about 6 or 7, and they didn't know who I was. Yeah.
I think everybody's on travels. I've just come back from India just late on Monday evening. It's a bit jet lagged. I'm sort of feeling it. Want to go to sleep. It's sort of India's sort of 5 hours ahead. I
Mm.
just don't know how you do it, Richard. With jet lag.
Yeah. Looks like we're ready to go.
Right, I think the time is nigh, as they say. So welcome to this meeting of the Employment Committee on this cold, windy, Maunday Thursday evening. We won't ask whose brilliant idea it was to have this meeting at this time. We'll move on quickly to the first item, which is apologies for absence, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. No apologies for absence have been received this evening.
Thank you. The minutes of the previous meeting, is everybody happy for me to sign those off? Thank you. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations to be made? No, nobody up there? No, good, okay. The answer is none, right. We now come to the substantive part of the meeting, and I'm going to take, with your permission, item 6 first, which is the email security policy. And I'm doing that because somebody asked me to do it. And who am I to refuse? This is a new policy, and unfortunately Sally Turnbull, who prepared it, I think that's true, is unable to be with us this evening. And I think right from the start, there are some concerns about some aspects of this. But I think the plain fact of the matter is that, certainly in my view, the need for an email security policy is self-evident. So in the briefing meeting we had earlier, it's been agreed to review this in 12 months' time in the light of practice, obviously. And it's also been agreed to support the policy with necessary training so that staff are clear on what it's all about, and what is permitted, and more to the point, what is not permitted. So with that background, is somebody going to introduce us, or are you just going to take it as read? Sally, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So as the Chair has alluded to, this is really an information management policy rather than an HR policy. And councillors could say, well, why is it therefore at this particular committee? But we felt it was really helpful to go through the same process as a normal HR policy, because it is so dependent on the staff and how they behave and setting them parameters. You'll be aware, councillors, that cyber risk is one of our corporate risks on our corporate risk register, and part of my role is to mitigate that cyber risk. And this policy certainly does do that. We know that most cyber risk issues enter into our hardware through email and email links and that sort of thing. So it was considered a really important policy for us to introduce. As the Chair has suggested, we have agreed to bring it back in a year to reflect on how it's landed and to evaluate its success. And we've also agreed to support it with the training plan. Happy to take any questions or feedback, but please do be aware this isn't necessarily my technical area of expertise. Thank you, councillors.
Okay, so with the heavy caveats which have been laid down on this, does anybody have any questions, queries, comments, please? Councillor Thorne, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Apology, I'll try and be kind with my questions. I'm just going to put my information manager's hat on because that's what I do for my day job as well. I've just got a few things which I noticed on the policy. First one being on page 9, where it talks about other domains, email domains, which you can send certain information to. I noticed the mod email domain is actually incorrect. It should be mod.gov.uk. I think that changed about 5 years ago, I think, when they changed their systems over there. Chair, if I may, I've got 2 other points, if you're happy for me to raise those as well. On page 13, there was just one slight confusion I had where it spoke about, obviously for councillors, that there should be a 4-year lifespan for keeping certain information. But is that still going to be the case if, for example, there's an election and the councillor loses their seat? Will that email account potentially with those records and other information still be held, or will that be deleted? Because I'm conscious on the following page, in section 17, it says that if someone leaves the council, their emails will be shut down within 6 months, which potentially goes against the policy on the previous page for record management, which was my main kind of pick up there. One of the other points was it speaks that when we believe we have an email which should be referred to as a record, but we should potentially put it into the box or into one of the other shared filed areas. My question is, and forgive me, you may not know the answer to this one, but is box and the other areas a sufficient record management system? Only because I hadn't come across those ones before, but I may be wrong there.
Thank you, Councillor Thorne. So on the 6 months, councillors deleted after 6 months question, you're absolutely right. My understanding is that all email accounts are deleted 6 months after a person has left either the employ of the council or the use of a councillor email address. So we can ask Sally just to put that in the policy and get that clarified. So, with regards to the second question, which I'm struggling to remember, please can you just remind me?
But that was just with reference
about
to
box. That's right.
being
Thank
a record
you.
management system.
Sorry, Councillor Thorne. Brain just had a little blip there. Yes, so Box is a storage management system, and it is a good records management system, with hierarchical files that are filed, and we do use it as our main fileage storage system. In fact, our plan is to move away from Box over the next 18 months or so. But yes, at the moment we're using Box as our storage file storage system.
Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. I also observed the same thing there as Councillor Thorne around the slight contradiction between the 4 years and the 6 months. And I think potentially the text just needs tidying up so that anybody reading it wouldn't have the same confusion that we had. But my main point was whether this policy applied or not to the members, because it's not clear at the beginning of the policy that that's the case in the description of the scope. But then further down, as was just highlighted, it does allude to members. So I think it is important just to clarify the scope of the policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Just to clarify, my understanding is it does apply to members. It applies to all email users, but we can certainly emphasise that in the scope of the policy. And my understanding also is that training will be given to councillors as well as staff.
Okay, anybody else?
Councillor Betton's got his hand raised on Zoom.
Let's go to Councillor Betton on Zoom, please, first, and then Councillor Thorne.
Thank you, David. I cannot overemphasize how great a potential risk this is and how important this issue is to the council and all of us. The training is vital. And I would also like to ask whether that training will include regular sending of phishing emails, false ones, to everybody to make sure that they can pick them out. In my own company, I have 1 or 2 emails a week that are testing me on whether I can pick them out. So not only training, but making sure that the training is working. If you pick it out, you could report it and you get a little message back saying, congratulations, well done, you've picked out this phishing email. So it's important both ways, training and testing, and it has to be continuous because the people that are trying to hack into everywhere are becoming aware of what defenses people are putting up, and it is vital that we maintain security and we keep ahead of them or try and keep us up with them as far as we can. That's the point that I'm emphasizing with my risk head hat on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Betton. So I think there's a number of points that we've invested in a training programme that does send fake phishing emails to staff, and if they click on the link by mistake rather than report it, it takes them into a training scenario saying, did you realise that you shouldn't have clicked on this link for these reasons, sorts of thing. I don't know that it does a nice little congratulations email if you pick it up, which is a bit of a shame. I like the idea of a congratulations email, but we also, of course, we have a lot of protection about our systems to block emails that come from sources that aren't trusted. But of course, as you absolutely rightly point out, Councillor Betton, things do come through. So we've got data protection training that we have to do on a regular basis anyway, but we've also got those phishing emails coming into the staff to be tested. Thank you.
Councillor Thorne.
Thank you, Chair. My last point it's more of a suggestion, really. So one of the features of Office 365 is that within Outlook you can add in sensitivity labels, and I didn't know whether this might be something which could be quite handy for councillor emails and, well, council emails, in fact, because you can set the labels to be, for example, confidential, something that's open to the public, or should be closed or has protected data inside it. So then once it's sent to a user, they know actually that's what's in here, I shouldn't be forwarding it on, or X, Y and Z. I think especially where often as councillors we can sometimes end up receiving information which potentially shouldn't be released to the public yet, or can be released, and that can just act as a good way of knowing actually what can you do, and it comes up with a big bar at the top of every email, just so you know exactly what's contained within inside. And it's just a thought that might be useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorne. We'll definitely take that suggestion away and have a look at it.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I hate to disagree with Councillor Betton for the first time probably ever. I'm in an organisation where sometimes, we get a lot of test phishing emails, and it really antagonises people and wastes their time when they should be working on their emails or something else. And they all tend now to get sent directly to the UK government authority on fraudulent emails, which then wastes more time the organisation and having to deal with inquiries from them.
Thank you for that. I think I'm going to let the two of you sort that out amongst yourselves in the fullness of time. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. So it's really a follow-up from the confirmation that the policy does apply to members. Section 15 on page 65 of the whole deck talks about accessing the mailbox of another member of staff. Obviously, members are not technically members of staff. I don't think per se any of us would be against that. I just think it might require reframing with potentially different people in the authority chain to approve that to happen for members. I certainly know we have at least one councillor who's currently not in the group here who is absolutely paranoid about council staff accessing their email. I'm per se not against it. I just think it needs to be managed and controlled.
Thank you. I think that is being noted. Just a couple of comments, if I might. The point that Councillor Betton made about the critical nature of this policy to the council, I think is very well made, and that's one of the reasons why I think it's important that the document goes forward from us tonight, albeit subject to some of the amendments which have been made. I think it also emphasises the need for the review that we discussed earlier as well, because we need to treat this, I think, in this highly dynamic area as a moving feast, as it were. Needs to be constantly looked at and amended, and that review will allow that to happen. On the point about councillors' emails, I'm probably the only person here who can tell you that as soon as you cease to become a councillor, and this is from bitter experience, your email goes away, and instantly, I might add, the following day. You switch on automatically in the morning, as you have done for the previous X number of years, and all of a sudden it's not there. So that part of the system certainly works. On a more serious note, I think certainly the Councillor Code of Conduct touches on the use of email, and I think probably that needs to be revisited and maybe linked to this particular policy, so that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, as it were, in that regard. So, anybody else have any final comments? I'll take that as a no. So we're asked to resolve that the email security policy as set out be adopted. Are we so agreed? Thank you. We will now go on to the disciplinary policy, item 4, and you're going to introduce that, Sally?
I am indeed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
The disciplinary policy is one of our core policies. It's one of the most important policies in the Council from an HR perspective because, of course, it can result in dismissal. So it's one we regularly like to review and just make sure that it reflects best practice. I should point out that the law in relation to disciplinaries hasn't changed, but we always do like to review it. I think this was last reviewed in 2018, along with the grievance policy. So you can see the amendments that we have made. Most of them are just stylistic changes and changes to job names and that sort of thing. But I would welcome councillor comments on the policy. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's clear enough. Anybody have any comments to make? Councillor MacDonald. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very pleased to see under 6.3 specific adjustments in terms of to be made to help people who may be challenged in the mediation meeting here. What wasn't so clear was that overarching principle cascaded into all the meetings through the policy, because there are other meetings that are referred to, and that desire to make those adjustments available where possible didn't seem to flow through. So that's maybe just one thing that could just be tightened up. I did have a second one, but I shall pause and come back.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I've got just a number of very kind of small, brief points. If it's okay, I'll do them one at a time, just to avoid the confusion about which answer goes with this question. So the first one is on page 17 of the full agenda pack. So that's page 9 of 21 of the report. 10.1, legal representation is not permitted for the employee at the hearing. I'm just wondering why that is the case.
Yes, so I can just confirm we never allow legal representation at a disciplinary hearing because it's just not appropriate. It's not subject to legal proceedings. It's not got to that point at that stage. It's not an employment tribunal. It's an office meeting. You just wouldn't. It's not appropriate to have legal representation there.
Thank you. The next one is on the next page, page 18, 11.4. It talks about two clear working days notice for witnesses, and it seems to imply that only applies to the employee. Does that apply to the council as well? And does it apply to new elements of evidence or defence evidence or evidence on either side?
So the council has to provide 5 clear working days notice for witnesses that they want to call.
Thank you. Incredibly small question on page 23, which is page 15 of 21 of the report. 13.6, are the words missing at the end of that paragraph? It seems to end with without a full stop.
Councillor Wilson, we'll just look at the formatting of that when we finalise the policy. We think it's just a formatting error.
Okay, great. My final very small question is on that page, section 14. And so if someone is found to have committed gross misconduct, it says they may be dismissed. Is it the intention of the policy that an employee is found to commit the gross misconduct that they will always be dismissed, or will there be occasions when they won't be?
No, it's not the policy of the council to have the gross misconduct always dismissal. You can have a final written warning and other sanctions. Thank you.
Thank you.
You've remembered your second point, Councillor MacDonald. Thank you.
Yeah, it's one of those days when you can't remember things. Thank you, Chair. Taking 9.3 as an example, I think it may link to Councillor Wilson's comment. There seems to be a bias towards the employee having to provide the evidence that they wish to rely on. It's not so clear that the council has to provide the evidence. It comments about written details of the nature of alleged misconduct, but it doesn't talk about provision of the evidence of the council's case. And it just feels like in the interest of natural justice, it should be an obligation on both parties. So, for example, if D, so 9.3D, it requests that the council be provided with copies of any evidence the employee wishes to rely on. but it doesn't seem under B that we, under B that we put the same obligation on ourselves.
That's what we'll be releasing to that person, to the.
So my understanding is that both parties have to have an exchange 5 clear working days beforehand. We'll make sure that that wording makes it clear that it is an exchange of information 5 days beforehand, because I think we have just made the assumption it is a mutual exchange, but it clearly isn't as clear as it could be. So we'll make sure it is.
It is.
Okay.
Make sure it says that.
Any other comments, questions, queries? Good. Okay.
I did have one more, and my name might be Councillor Wilson after this one. On 7.3, it says the employee has the right to be accompanied to the investigation meeting. It says they must choose their companion from one of the following. Must implies that they have to have a companion. They don't have to have a companion, that's their choice. There are matters of sensitivity, they may decide not to have a companion. I've been in those cases myself.
Yeah, they don't have, you're absolutely right, you don't have to be accompanied. But the point we do have to make is that they can only have people, if they are accompanied, from that list. We can certainly put a sentence on after that saying, you know, if you don't want to be accompanied, that's absolutely your choice. Not better wording than that, obviously, but happy to put a line on to say that.
Good. Fine. There being no other points, we are asked to resolve that the revised disciplinary policy as set out be adopted. Are we so minded? Thank you. And we move smoothly, like a well-oiled machine, onto the grievance policy, which again I think you're going to introduce, Sally. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair. Yes, like the disciplinary policy, the grievance policy is a really important policy for us. Of course, you don't end up in a dismissal situation with the grievance, but it is the formal method by which an employee can raise and then hopefully resolve a work-related problem. And of course, if grievances aren't well handled in accordance with the ACAS Code of Guidance, and they do end up in an employment tribunal, then things can get very expensive for the council. So it's a really important policy for us. I'd like to thank the Chair, who gave us a number of bits of feedback on this policy and indeed the disciplinary policy that we are incorporating. There is, like the disciplinary policy, this policy hadn't been reviewed since 2018. There has been no change to the law, but we always update it to reflect best practice. One of the key changes in this policy is that we have put a time limit on grievances. So previously the policy did not have a time limit, and now you must raise a grievance within 6 months of the final act that has led to you being aggrieved. And that was subject to some conversation at joint staff, but there are other policies to raise issues that wouldn't be treated as a grievance, for example, the dignity and respect at work policy, and also the speak up policy, which is the council's whistleblowing policy. So there are still mechanisms for employees to raise historic issues, for example, historic bullying, but we would not treat them as a grievance under this policy. One of the changes that the Chair made to the policy, which I think is a really good one, relates to a rather woolly sentence that was about whether you could raise a grievance if you weren't an employee, and we have simplified that sentence to say you cannot raise a grievance unless you are an employee of this council under this policy. I'm happy to take any questions, concerns, thoughts, feedback on this policy. Thank you, councillors.
Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, Chair, I think you called me. You broke up a little bit there.
Your hand is up.
Thank you. Sorry, I just lost connection a little bit with you there. I should have said this previously. I think the format of these reports is really good. It's really easy to read and see the changes that were made at joint staff, and they all improve the text. So thank you for that. So on this one, it's page 39 and 43 of the main agenda pack, which is page 7 and page 11 of 15 of the report. For example, 8.3, it says to communicate with the employee who's made the grievance, communicate with them the result. Should there be communication with the employee who is the subject of the grievance as well, to let them know that the result of the hearing? Thank you.
There be communication with
Sorry, Councillor Wilson, you broke up slightly there. Could you just repeat your final point, please?
Yeah, so there's two references at least to communicating the result of the grievance procedure with the person who has raised the grievance. Should there also be communication with the person who is the subject of the grievance as well?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Wilson. Good point. We'll make sure that's added in. Thank you.
Any other points? Councillor Thorne, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a short one from me. Just reference the informal approach to grievances. I note that employees have the opportunity to speak to a member of the HR team for impartial advice and what have you about the potential grievance. Is there any mechanism to record, albeit anonymously, any conversations which are had to help build a picture over time, even if it is just informal? I know there is a records policy for the formal section. I just wondered if there was anything in place for the informal.
So it's a really good question, but what this sits on is the sort of trust and confidentiality that staff have with the HR team. They have to know that they can talk to the HR team about anything, and that won't necessarily go on their file or indeed anybody else's file. We're very careful about what we record and what we don't record, and we'd be very reluctant to record informal conversations because we'd have to be transparent about that, and that would be something that it would mean that we couldn't be trusted as a department because we were recording everything that was said. So I think that's something that we just wouldn't ever want to go down.
Unless we got their permission. But
Yeah.
it's, most of the time if somebody's talking to me, I put my pen down so that they feel that they've got that opportunity to be very open.
We very deliberately, obviously, don't record things when we're having one of those conversations.
We'll go to Councillor MacDonald and then I believe Councillor Wilson again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So again, like Councillor Wilson, I appreciated the fact that we can see all the changes and it makes our lives easier whizzing through it. I like this policy and I like the previous policy as well, even though I may have picked a few holes here and there. One observation, though, that I had is all of the policies are quite wordy, and the fact that people like me are getting semantic about the word "must" doesn't help. But I'm just wondering, when I was reflecting on particularly this policy, whether a diagram to try and help people navigate their way through the policies could be appropriate and how they connect with each other, and that could actually be inserted into probably the front end of all of the key policies, because we refer to, if you don't want to do this, then you should do that, and here's 3 other policies that you could consider. But I think it might be helpful from the employee's point of view just understand how to navigate through that maze of policies. So that was more an observation than anything else.
So firstly, I think that's an excellent point. I love a workflow, and I think it would make policies much easier to negotiate and read, and it's something that I feel we should probably introduce. I really like that idea. I've used it in policies before, and managers particularly find it really useful. Chair's just asked me if we'd need to bring that back under the work programme. As the workflow would only reflect the policy as it is, I don't necessarily feel that there'd be any change at all. It would just be a diagram of the policy. So with the committee's permission, I don't think we necessarily need to bring it back under the work programme, but happy to circulate it by email, the final policy, when the workflow's done, if that would be suitable.
Fine, thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. It's just on appeals, so appeals against the grievance hearing result and appeals against disciplinary hearing results. There's a slight difference to lodge an appeal against the grievance. The employee has 10 days from receipt of the letter of the result of the hearing, and on disciplinaries it's 10 days from the date of the letter, which was a change that had been made, I think, by joint staff. So I was just wondering if it was done intentionally, or should both of the policies have the same deadline to lodge an appeal?
Thank you.
Page numbers. If it helps, I've got the page numbers for you for the main agenda pack. It's page 25 and page 44. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Councillor Wilson. Agree they should be consistent. We'll do them as 10 days from the date of the letter.
Thank you.
Just on that subject, we did discuss the question of consistency of expression, if you like, in the briefing, and I think it's I think that point in particular is helpful too. Thank you. Does anybody have any further comment? No. So once again, we're asked to resolve that the revised policy as set out to the report be adopted. Is that so agreed? Thank you. We now move on to the casual and temporary working policy, which by definition is somewhat technical because of the changes which have come about in recent years in respect of different categories of working status. There was a time when it was very straightforward. You either worked for the organisation or you did not work for the organisation. That is no longer the case, hence the need for this this policy. Again, Sally.
Thank you, Chair. So as the Chair has suggested, this is a policy aimed to support managers to understand the different sort of statuses, if you like, of employees and workers who work in the council. And the reason is because you'll be aware that there's been a very this is a very active area of case law at the moment, with cases like the Pimlico plumbers and the Uber drivers and Deliveroo and all sorts of things. So we have particularly casual workers who work at the theatre, and we also have casual workers at elections, and we have a number of agency workers as well. Agency workers, of course, take on legal rights after 12 weeks. And so this policy, and I do apologise because it is very technical, but this policy is there to support managers understanding the different ways they should treat different categories of workers, and to just support and mitigate the risk of treating a non-employee as an employee by mistake. Again, very happy to take any questions, comments or feedback. Thank you, councillors.
just to make the point that on the issues on page 10 associated with layout and the typo concerning the word employment have already been picked up. So does anybody have any comments or queries on this policy? Councillor Wilson.
I'm not sure if this is what you were just referring to, Chair. It's page 75 of the full agenda pack. Just checking what date it's due to become effective, or what date is the intention on the report.
Yes, so it's effective from the time the policy goes live, which will be today, effectively assuming councillors do pass it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other points? No. Excellent. So once again, and for the last time of asking, I think we're asked to resolve that the policy as set out be adopted. Is that so agreed? Thank you. That leads us then, I believe, to the work programme. Excuse me, apologies. And in that regard, there was a supplementary paper issued this afternoon, which hopefully you all picked up. And the only difference between the original and this afternoon's version was the dates. There was some confusion over the dates, which has now been corrected. So is everybody happy with the work programme as laid out, or does anybody have any comments? Fine, so we will assume that the work programme is agreed. Okay, and on that note, there being no other business on this day before the Easter holiday begins, we will close the meeting. Thank you for your attendance on this wild and windy night. Good night.